What's going on, people? Finally got behind the mic. Been a long day. And I told y'all one of the most relaxing things I can do at the end of the day is just come and kick it with y'all. Talk ball or whatever we decide to talk about. You know how sometimes these things can take on a mind and a life of their own. But the divisional round is now in the rearview mirror, but we're going to go ahead and put a nice, pretty bow on it tonight. So I've got takeaways from each of the four contests from over the weekend, as we are now down to our final four participants in the 2023-2024 NFL season. So we will talk about that. A lot of news going on with the coaching carousel, with the front office moves. So we'll dive into that. We'll get to whatever it is you guys want to talk about as well tonight. And then some. All here on the Louie T Network podcast that starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the 391st installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Tons to get to tonight. And then there were four, as in four teams left in the NFL playoffs. Championship Sunday will be a dandy. We've got the 1 seed versus the 3 seed in the NFC. The 1-seeded 49ers taking on the 3rd-seeded Detroit Lions. And in the AFC, we got probably the best matchup we could have gotten. And that one's going to be fun. 1-seeded Baltimore Ravens also taking on the 3rd-seeded Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll get to our breakdowns, or my takeaways rather, from those games. A lot of news in the NFL, and we'll dive into some of that as we progress into the show. A couple of things non-football related that we may tackle today. Some crazy NBA outbursts yesterday. 70 points for Joel Embiid, 62 points for Karl Anthony Towns. Adrian Griffin fired after starting 30-13, and the 2nd seed currently 3.5 games behind the NBA best Boston Celtics, and he gets canned. We'll probably talk about that at some point. Baseball Hall of Fame, 3 new members. I don't know the last time I saw that many guys get in at once. Maybe I'm tripping, and maybe 3 years ago, 3 guys got in, 4 guys got in. You know, baseball don't play that shit. They don't just let anybody in. Joe Mauer, Adrian Beltre, and Todd Helton all got in. I'm trying to recall Joe Mauer's career. Adrian Beltre and Todd Helton definitely deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm just thinking back to Joe Mauer's career, and I'm like, you're supposed to be in the Hall of Fame? I'm going to have to go look at his numbers. I do think he did win an MVP one year. So I do think there's that. But I'm not sure if he's a Hall of Fame player or not. I got to go look. I'm probably selling him short. It's probably what I'm ultimately doing. But anyway, I digress. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of why we're here, which is taking a look at these divisional round contests and giving you my biggest takeaways from those games that took place over the weekend. So without any further ado, let's put that nice, pretty bow on divisional round weekend as we mosey on towards Championship Sunday. And in order to do that, we're going to do it with an old-fashioned gem dropping session. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. So, we'll go in chronological order of which the games were played. So we start with the Houston Texans at the Baltimore Ravens. And the first takeaway I have, and I'll try to do these in the order of importance. So the first takeaway I have in the Houston Texans Baltimore Ravens game, 34-10, your final score in that game, if you needed a reminder. The future is bright in Houston. However, let's see what they do for an encore. What we've learned in the NFL over the years is that 1 year doesn't make you a great franchise. 1 year can put you on the map, and the very next season, we can lose you on that same map. So let's see what happens with the Houston Texans next year. Case in point, the Los Angeles Chargers made it to the postseasons last year. Granted, they blew a 27-7 lead and ultimately collapsed and lost. However, who saw them turning around and having a 5-win season the next year? Not I. So you just never know, right? Young, talented quarterback, excellent offensive coordinator. Will he get a job? If Bobby Slowick is wrestled away from the Houston Texans, and honestly, I can see a situation in which Bobby Slowick doesn't get a job and has to go back to Houston for 1 more year. I know Texans fans would love that. I could see a situation where that happens. This is probably the biggest issue that takes place with teams that last long into the postseason is you miss out on some opportunities potentially. The good thing about him is he lost in the divisional round, and so he can start to get to the face-to-face interviews in person, and that may help him snag one of these available jobs. But with the Titans making a decision already, I thought that was going to be ultimately where he ended up. Obviously, there's still Washington, still Seattle, there's still Carolina. I don't see him in Atlanta. Don't think that's the kind of coach that they're looking for there. And he's not going to the Chargers. I think they're fixated on Jim Harbaugh. So really what it boils down to is, will he end up in either Washington, Carolina, or Seattle? I think are the 3 places that are currently open that need a head coach that haven't really focused and zeroed in on a specific candidate. I think, as we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, the Falcons have kind of narrowed their search to Harbaugh and Belichick, and I think they're open to a Vrabel if that's what they have to do, or even a Raheem Morris, or I think it's going to be or Mike McDonald, somebody of that ilk. I think they are going to go with one of these defensive-minded guys. We'll see. But Slowick coming back is going to be huge if they're going to be successful. If he doesn't come back and gets a head coaching job, we could see the Texans not be as dynamic next season. But currently, as constructed, the future is bright in Houston. They did all of this without Tank Dell for the final probably 5 to 6 games of the season. They're going to get him back next year. They're going to have another draft class coming in. They're going to have free agency. They're in a really good spot. In a really good spot are the Houston Texans. Mike McDonald continues to impress and strengthen his head coaching resume. One of the guys that I think has really benefited from this postseason run has been Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald. As a matter of fact, I'd probably go on and I'd venture to say he's benefited the most out of any of these coordinators. I think a lot of people were already, maybe Bobby Slowick too. You know, I think that final game of the regular season in which the Texans had to win to get in, and they opened up the game with a 75-yard bomb to Nico Collins for a touchdown. I think that game opened a lot of people's eyes, as well as the wild card weekend demolition of the Cleveland Browns. But Mike McDonald has shut down all of these dudes. And I think that's what's coming into focus now. I think people were late to the Mike McDonald party, but watching him in the postseason, watching his Ravens team, and I think people, now that there aren't, 10 other games on and you can be distracted away from what's going on in Baltimore, now that you have to focus on what's going on in Baltimore, I think people are starting to realize, damn, this defense is really good. And the guy calling the defense is what makes it special. Because it's funny, I put out a video yesterday talking about how Mike McDonald, I think, is a very underrated candidate and not enough people are talking about him. And one of the comments I saw from someone was, well, is he going to bring all of these all-pro players with him? And I'm like, but that's the thing, is these guys weren't all pros before Mike McDonald got to them and put them in this scheme and put them in positions to succeed. The only guy that had all-pro credentials prior to Mike McDonald getting his hands on them was Roquan Smith. Everybody else were solid NFL contributors. None of them were even Pro Bowlers at this point of their careers. So he really morphed these guys into the players that they ultimately have been this season and putting them in positions to succeed. And so he continues to impress. Obviously, this was another important win, not only for the Ravens organization, but for Mike McDonald in particular, going up against one of these hot coordinator names that's been circling about in Bobby Slowick. This is the second time the Ravens have put a hurting on the Texans this season. Did it in week one, also did it here in the divisional round. They didn't even make it to the 20-yard line, never set foot in the Ravens red zone the entire game, did not score. For the second time this season, the Texans played the Ravens and in 8 quarters did not score a single offensive touchdown. So Mike McDonald continues to dominate the competition. He did it to Ben Johnson and the Lions in a 38-6 destruction there. Did it to Kyle Shanahan, 33-19, 5 turnovers forced in that game by this Ravens defense that led the NFL in turnovers forced, led the NFL in sacks with 60 during the regular season, and led the NFL in scoring defense, giving up less than 15 points per game. So needless to say, Mike McDonald continues to impress and strengthen his head coaching resume. I think he's going to land a gig when it's all said and done. Lamar Jackson is obviously the headliner here, though. He needed a postseason run. It is not done yet. I don't think the championship game satisfies anybody's hunger for Lamar Jackson to succeed. However, getting to his first AFC championship game was massive. He needed this for his resume. He needed this for his career. I'm happy it's happening for him in the biggest game of his career in this divisional round, postseason tilt. He went out and he was marvelous. Accounted for 4 touchdowns in this game, 2 on the ground, 2 as a passer. Now he's just 1 win away from making his first Super Bowl appearance. And whether this thing turns out to be a success for him or not, getting to the Super Bowl is going to be huge for him. Winning it would be absolutely the final dagger in the hearts of all of those who over the years said you can't win a Super Bowl with a guy like Lamar Jackson who can't throw the football from the pocket. And I know that's ultimately what he wants to do, is to stick it to all of those people who made that comment, who stood by that. And I know he's got receipts. And while Lamar has usually taken the high road on a lot of these things, if he wins the Super Bowl, I could see not only him, but potentially Mama coming out of the woodworks being petty. And I don't blame them at all whatsoever. Remember, once upon a time, Bill Polian, the famed former Bills and Colts GM, said that Lamar Jackson should work out at running back at the combine and should switch his position. So him being one win away from the Super Bowl, a lot of people were starting to look at him in the same prism, or from the same prism, as a Dak Prescott, or even a Josh Allen, the guy that once again didn't make it to the championship game. They were starting to look at him like those quarterbacks who haven't had the postseason success, and less like, Josh Allen, who has made it to a AFC championship game, and more like Dak Prescott, who has just been awful in the postseason. And up until this game, Lamar had been awful in the postseason. So for him to not only win this game, but to shine in this game, over 150 yards passing, over 100 yards rushing, accounted for 4 touchdowns. It was a pretty big game for Lamar Jackson. We'll see if he's able to get it done once more to put himself in an even better position to strengthen his legacy. Packers at the 49ers. This game was wild, to say the least. This game had a lot in it. See, the final score of this game ended up being 24-21. And we're going to start with Green Bay. The Packers had their chances in this game and they blew it. And anybody that watched the game knows exactly what I'm talking about. Whether you're talking about not getting it done in the red zone, which they did not do in this game and had been wildly successful against Dallas the week prior, dropping not one, but 2 interceptions. One would have been a pick 6 by Darnell Savage, which would have been his second in as many weeks in the postseason. And then obviously having your rookie field goal kicker, Andres Carlson, miss a field goal. So all of these things rolled into a 3-point. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jordan Love with an awful decision at the end of this game. It almost felt like an exclamation point. He threw 2 picks in this game. So you had 2 opportunities for picks, didn't catch either. And then you throw 2 picks of your own. Not going to get it done. But ultimately, even with all of that said, Jordan Love still played a whale of a ball game and was really good in the postseason, and was dynamite down the stretch of the regular season to even put the Packers in a position to make the playoffs in the first place. And thus, Jordan Love is set up for a massive payday this offseason. And he bet on himself, essentially, this past offseason by reaching a 1-year, $13 million deal with the Packers. He essentially bet on himself. And he's going to be paid and rewarded handsomely for going out and getting it done. They're gonna be really lamenting this missed opportunity, are the Packers. But they're so young, I don't even think they're gonna realize the opportunity. When you're young, I can tell you this right now. When you're young and you win and you make it like the Packers just did to the divisional round, or you make it to the championship game like Josh Allen did in like his 3rd season, and you're young, you just tell yourself, oh, shit, we'll be back. You know, I'm pretty sure that's what Dan Marino did when he went to the Super Bowl in his second season of his NFL career. I'm pretty sure he said, hey, I ain't even tripping. We'll be back. He never made it back. You know, and Barry Sanders had the same thing happen to him in his career. His third season in the league, he makes it to the NFC Championship game, and he's thinking, okay, we'll be back. He was never back, right? And so this young Packers team probably thinks, okay, this is just the start. This is just the beginning, and it may be for them. Or they could never make it to the divisional round again. Who knows? If Jordan Love plays the way that he played down the final 8 games or so of the season and into the postseason, they'll be back. But we'll see. The 49ers will have to play better to win in the NFC Championship game. And Debo's injury is concerning, but guys stepped up in his absence, particularly Jawan Jennings. Now, they're going to need Deebo Samuel if they want to win a Super Bowl. You may be able to get past the Detroit Lions without him. We'll see what the extent of that injury is. He had a shoulder injury earlier in the season that cost him 2 games, so I always worry. I don't know if it's the same shoulder. My guess is it is. I always worry about injuries to a body part that you sustained an injury to earlier in the season and missed time for. So again, anytime a guy gets injured and returns to the sideline in civvies, that to me is never a good sign, because clearly something is wrong enough for them to say you can't go back in the game, so you can go ahead and put on your clothes. You done, right? That's never a good thing. But we'll see what happens there. But it's good to know that in his absence, other guys can, will, and are able to step up and make plays, and that they did throughout the game. Hell, even Chris Conley caught a pass on that game-winning drive, right? They're going to need guys to step up if Debo can't go, because not one guy on that roster is capable of filling his shoes, but 3 or 4 of them may be able to do an adequate job, right? They're going to have to do a better job of applying pressure to the quarterback, though. When it's all said and done, one, they're going to have to stop the run way better than they did in this game. That was a gross display of stopping the run. Their edges were way too soft in this game. The Packers had way too much success getting outside of their ends. No one set a physical edge. No one spilled the runs back towards the help. Everything that got outside seemed to have success, even when they stuck their foot in the ground, pressed outside, and cut it back inside like Aaron Jones did on that big 54-yard run or whatever it was. They're going to have to clean that shit up. If you allow the Lions to be balanced, you're going to have a very tough go of it. And if that's Jahmyr Gibbs on that cutback run, that's a touchdown. So you're going to have to clean that shit up. And you're going to have to get pressure on Jared Goff. I mean, who are we kidding? One of my biggest complaints about the 49ers this season, specifically down the stretch, is their lack of pressure on opposing QBs. You would think the additions of Randy Gregory and Javon Hargrave and Chase Young would have done wonders for this defensive line that already featured Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, and Javon Kinlaw. But clearly, those upgrades haven't really produced much of anything in the way of extra pressure on the quarterback without having the blitz. It did help Nick Bosa's total go through the roof once Chase Young, showed up, but still, he can't do it by himself, and they're not generating enough pressure with just a 4-man rush. So something's going to have to be done. I know Steve Wilkes isn't a big blitzer, but he's going to have to change that. If they let Jared Goff stand back there, they could be in some trouble. We'll see. Then finally, Brock Purdy put together a potentially career-defining game-winning drive. The pressure couldn't have been more intense. The stage couldn't have been any bigger, and the lights couldn't be any brighter. And Brock Purdy was soiling himself before that last drive. And had the 49ers not won this game, everything Cam Newton had said about him, Tua, Dak, and Jared Goff would have been thrown right into his face. And all of those people out there would have said, see, Cam told you. And they were waiting for it. They had, all of them had their tweets and their posts queued up, ready to hit send as soon as that game was done and the 49ers lost to the Green Bay Packers. Purdy did not play well, but he erased all of the poor play and the damage that had been done earlier in the game with that one signature drive. And for him, that could turn into his Joe Montana, the catch, right? Where Montana goes on to folklore status, wins a bunch of Super Bowls, and the rest is history. That drive could be Brock Purdy's the catch. Even though it wasn't a play, that drive was huge. The 49ers, I had no idea that Kyle Shanahan, when down by 7 points or more in the fourth quarter, was like 0-30. I had no idea. That was news to me. But obviously, 49ers fans knew about it, and they were tired of hearing about it. And Brock Purdy did something about it in that fourth quarter. It was a big play, or a big possession rather, made some big throws. I thought his best throw came on the possession before that, where they didn't get any points out of it. But he makes a ridiculous third down throw, 3rd and like 10 throw to Jawan Jennings over the middle of the field. Incredible throw. The throw to Brandon Ayuk on that game-winning drive, are you kidding me? I mean, the coverage couldn't be any tighter. That was potentially, and we'll see what the rest of this season ultimately ends up being for the 49ers. But if they go on to win the Super Bowl, that right there will be remembered as the drive that potentially started it all. A lot of people had to eat their words after that drive. And there's still going to be naysayers out there. As I mentioned, he did not have a great game. I'm starting to believe that Brock Purdy struggles in the rain. I'm starting to believe that he struggles in the rain. But nonetheless, when they needed him the most, he stepped up. And that's a massive drive for Brock Purdy. Bucks at Lions. This was a game that featured the 3rd-seeded Detroit Lions and the 4th-seeded Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Final score here, 31-23. Lions get it done. We start with the Bucks. The Bucks overachieved this season, largely in part to Baker Mayfield, who I firmly believe will get paid by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this offseason. He was huge. He was huge in their season this year. And, you know, what's funny is I don't think a lot of people realize this, but they have the longest streak in the NFC of making the postseason. They've gone 4 years in a row, starting with that Brady year in 2020 when they won the Super Bowl. Obviously, they went back the following year, lost in the divisional round that year, I believe. And then last year, Brady and company got bounced in the wild card weekend to Dallas, and then Baker Mayfield brings them back this year, and they make it to the divisional round yet again. So, and Mayfield had career highs across the board: yards passing, touchdowns, interceptions, career low. He was outstanding for the Bucks, and he showed those leadership qualities that a lot of coaches just absolutely love and want out of their quarterback. So was the game that he played particularly great? I honestly think he actually played well in this game. There were drops, clearly. The first interception off the hands of Mike Evans and into the hands of CJ Gardner-Johnson. And I told y'all this, right after the game. I don't think a lot of people noticed it live, but I told y'all he threw that ball at Baker. When he got that interception, Baker was coming over to try to make a tackle. He ran out of bounds. And as he was going back across to his sideline, he did a little finger roll at Baker, and the ball kind of hit Baker in his leg. And he was on IG Live after the game, like he always is, and talking shit like he always is. And he said, "Hey, and I threw that shit at you too. I hope you got it. Send that along with the jersey." Right? I was like, "Damn." But that's CJ for you. That's what the Eagles are missing. Like that swag, that, that mindset of, hey, we going to get them. It's either us or them, and it ain't going to be us, right? But Baker, he was good in the game. And even the second pick, the final pick that ended any opportunity of them winning the game, I saw what he was trying to do. He tried to layer it over that linebacker, and it was just a great play by Barnes, right? It's an excellent play. His first career interception. You'd like him to not get picked off on the very first play when you get the ball back with the chance, but he was trying to make a play. Great play by that linebacker. Baker's getting paid this offseason. I think the Bucs are really happy with what he provided them with, and we'll see what happens there. One more. Let's stick with the Bucs. I got another one with Tampa Bay. Was that the last time we'll see Mike Evans in a Bucs uniform? Remember, he gave the Bucs an ultimatum before the season started that they had until this date to negotiate with him, or else he wasn't going to talk to them until after the season. That date obviously came and went. Nothing got done. Now we're done with the season. And is Mike Evans done with Tampa? Is the question. Is he even open to coming back? If they were willing to sit down at the table with him after another 1,000-yard season, his 10th in a row to start his career, NFL record, would they be willing to allow him to finish his career in Tampa, or will he have to do that elsewhere? I will tell you this. One of my buddies is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, and he wants Mike Evans gone. I know fans that would love Mike Evans to be back in Tampa. He dropped a lot of balls this year. The pick at the beginning of the game, like my buddy just completely blames the loss on Evans. I'm like, bro, you can't do that. He's like, look, we got to stop defensively. We got the ball. Baker hits him right in the hands, and it gets picked off. And that kind of just set off a chain of events. And look, they overcame that. They weathered the storm. The game was tied at 10 at halftime. Like, I was like, I ain't trying to hear that. But yes, he did have some drops in the game. He has had a lot of drops this season. And so maybe it is time to move on. We'll see. I'm interested to see what happens with him this offseason. I think he'll end up donning a different uniform when it's all said and done. If the Bucs really wanted to lock him up, they could have done it before the season. They already know what kind of a player he is and what he means to that franchise. If they really wanted to lock him up, they could have done it already. And they didn't. So I think that's a sign that they probably won't. But we'll see. As we move on to the Lions. Defensively, the Lions are going to have to play better. They just are. So much is being made of Aaron Glenn and the defensive turnaround that the Lions have had this season. And I'm not here to shit on that. He's done wonders with that defense. They are much better than they were a season ago. People were calling for his head last year, and this is a much improved unit this season. That said, they've been cooked defensively 2 weeks in a row in the postseason. They gave up over 400 yards of offense to the Rams, including 367 yards to Matthew Stafford and 181 yards to Puka Nacua on 9 grabs. They follow that performance up with another stinker, if you ask me, in my opinion, over 400 total yards of offense for Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker goes for 349 in the game and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, the 2 interceptions make a huge difference, but still, there were drops. Baker could have had even more, might have even approached 400 without the drops. And then you had Mike Evans go for a $150 or whatever, right? So what I'm telling you is they're getting cooked in the secondary. And if they can't, and they blitzed, and I thought Dave Canales did a great job of combating that blitz, because what you see with Detroit a lot of times is, much like I talked about with San Francisco, they can't get home consistently with just 4. If Aiden Hutchinson doesn't win, there isn't another guy on that defensive line that scares you that's going to win. Aleem McNeil is really good, but outside of Aiden Hutchinson, if he doesn't get to the quarterback, if he doesn't apply pressure, then they have a tough time getting to the quarterback. So he just went ahead and blitzed, did Aaron Glenn last week, and it worked sometimes. They applied pressure to Baker, and we saw what happened. And then other times, like that screen that was beautifully executed at 17-10, they came with a 0 blitz, and Dave Canales threw a screen to the running back right behind it and a walk-in touchdown. It was gorgeous. Speaking of Dave Canales, I'm hearing that he's getting some head coaching consideration. We'll see if he ends up somewhere in this game of musical chairs. He did a fantastic job this year with Baker Mayfield and this Buccaneers offense. Anyway, they're going to have to play much better defensively if they have any shot at beating the San Francisco 49ers. They have not been good to start the postseason. But the offense was way better in the second half this week than they were last week. Remember, in Wild Card Weekend, first of all, in Wild Card Weekend, the Lions scored on drives of 10, 11, and 10 plays. All 3 drives resulted in touchdowns, and they could not be stopped, it felt like, in the first half. They only scored a field goal in the second half of that Wild Card Weekend game versus the Rams and had to hold on for dear life. So the question was, what were they going to do this week? Were they going to make the necessary adjustments in the second half of a game that was knotted up at 10? That Ben Johnson did after going 3 and out on their first possession of the second half. The Lions then scored touchdowns on each of their next 3 possessions, including a gorgeous, what felt like a game-sealing 10-play, 89-yard, 5-minute and some change drive, capped off by a touchdown to give them a 31-17 lead. Ultimately, that was the difference in the game. That touchdown was. What a gorgeous drive that was. And so 21 points in the second half after struggling the week prior in the second half, 14 of those 21 points coming in the fourth quarter. So big bounce back for Ben Johnson and that Lions offense in the second half. We'll see if they can do much of the same next week on the road for the first time this postseason in San Francisco. And then finally, the last thing I want to say about this particular game, the Jared Goff redemption story continues. I think he's got a shot at getting a massive payday this offseason. And unlike Daniel Jones and David Carr or Derek Carr, excuse me, who got paid last offseason, this guy has proven it now 2 years in a row. And unlike those 2 guys I just mentioned, he's got more playoff wins than those 2 do combined. Daniel Jones has 1. Derek Carr has none. Hell, Derek Carr has only been to the postseason once in his entire career. So needless to say, Goff has been to a Super Bowl. People forget that, conveniently forget that. And now he's on the verge. He's knocking at the door of going back to a Super Bowl. And I've said this, I don't know how many quarterbacks in NFL history have led 2 different franchises to the Super Bowl. Again, not saying win it, but led 2 different franchises to the Super Bowl. I know we talked about this, I think, a week or 2 ago when we said how many quarterbacks have won a Super Bowl with 2 different teams. That list is fairly short. I think we came up with Brady, and it was one more quarterback, Peyton Manning, right? did it as well. There may be one more on that list, maybe that we're forgetting, but that's a pretty tough feat to pull off. So the question then becomes, can Jared Goff lead a second franchise to the Super Bowl? Whatever the case may be, the man is red hot right now. And this is why San Francisco is going to have to apply pressure, or else he's 52 of 70. That's 74% completion percentage right now. 52 of 70 is Jared Goff in the postseason right now. 74% completion percentage for 564 yards, 3 touchdowns, and this is the most important stat. No interceptions, no turnovers. So that's no fumbles, no interceptions. He's not putting his team in harm's way. Now, with that said, he should have thrown a pick against Tampa Bay. If Jamel Dean could catch, it changes everything, but he didn't catch it. That's why defensive backs play defense and not offense. And so Goff has been outstanding. And I think it's going to lead to a big payday for him in the offseason. Good for Jared Goff. We'll see if this storybook fairy tale has a happily ever after ending or not. Chiefs and Bills. Bills Super Bowl window not closed, but it's closing very rapidly. This was a big loss. I talked about this all season. And let me go ahead and just get this 00 out of the way right now. Okay. I was wrong. I was adamant about Buffalo getting to the AFC Championship game. I said it after they lost in overtime to the Philadelphia Eagles. They were 6-6. They were like 12th in the AFC at the time. And I said it then, and I meant it, and I kept repeating it every single week. And I knew what the task at hand was. I knew who they had on the schedule. I knew that the Chiefs were on the schedule. I knew that there were some tough games that they were going to have to find a way to win, but they won them all, including the season finale at Miami to clinch the division and a playoff spot. Well, they had already clinched the playoff spot due to Jacksonville's loss earlier in the day, but to clinch the division, to get the 2 home playoff games was vital, because now you didn't have to go to Kansas City for the first time if you were to make it that far. They took care of business in wild card weekend, and then against the Steelers, and then here was the opportunity that you've been waiting on. A home date, not a road date, a home date with the Kansas City Chiefs. And to not get it done, gut punching and debilitating. And here's another reason why it was so important that you needed to get it done. And I was adamant that this was the year. This was the Giannis Antetokounmpo year, right? I said that multiple times. There's a lot of hurt quarterbacks. There's teams not playing their best ball this year. This is the window of opportunity that you need to seize, because you may never get this opportunity again. The stars may not align the way that they have this season for you. Find a way to get it done. They didn't get it done, obviously. Josh Allen's cap hit jumps from $18 million this year to $47 million next season, almost $30 million more counting against the cap. So it's going to restrict what you are able to do from a cap standpoint. And you're going to have to draft better, is what that means. As some of these players that you ultimately pay start to get into the meat and potatoes of their contract, you're going to have to start drafting guys that are going to be able to come in and help. It's going to be interesting to see how the Bills bounce back. That one felt like a stinging loss. That one did. It really did. Joe Brady and Stephon Diggs just don't mix. Now, Stephon Diggs had been a shell of himself probably before Brady took over as offensive coordinator, and he took over the final 7 games of the season. They fired Ken Dorsey after week 10. However, in the first 10 weeks of the season, Stephon Diggs had 70 some odd catches, 840 yards, and 7 touchdowns in those first 10 games. After the Ken Dorsey firing, the final 7 games of the season, he had like 30 some odd catches, 300 and something yards, and like 1 touchdown. Needless to say, he's been on the struggle bus. And there have been games where he's been targeted 2 or 3 times. He's not even getting the high volume number of targets that he used to. Clearly, he hasn't been the impact player that we're accustomed to seeing him be. He hasn't had a 100-yard game since week 6. And then the drop on the deep ball, that was just a thing of beauty. I think we may be seeing potentially, and I know we've said this before and we've heard things, rumblings and grumblings, but we may be seeing the beginning of the end of Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. We'll see. We know what happens when he gets unhappy. We saw some fragments last year before the start of the season. We'll see what happens this year after not having the best of finishes to the season. We'll see if he keeps it nice and quiet and comes back with his head down, ready to work, or if he starts to chirp and say, hey, I want out. And we know he's a grade A professional at forcing his way out of a situation he does not want to be in. We'll see. When he signed the extension, I felt like it was for life extension. We'll see. And I wonder if Joe Brady's going to be back. Seems like he did a really good job. I didn't love how they attacked Kansas City's defense, but it was working. So there's not much I can say, but it was so dink and dunkish. I've never seen Josh Allen used in that manner before. It was almost like they were trying to protect him from himself. And that's not what we do with Josh Allen. We don't do those things with superstar quarterbacks. We don't protect them from themselves. We let them be who they are, and we live with the results. So there was a lot of swing screens and wide receiver screens and hitches and quick get it out of Josh's hands. And I get it. This Chiefs defense is good. They're not that damn good, though. They're not that damn good. So I didn't necessarily love the game plan, but it is what it is. The Chiefs are turning into the New England Patriots for real. Fumble touchback rule in jeopardy. So let's parse through both of those, taking the former first. The Patriots, or the Chiefs, are the New England Patriots. And they had already been establishing themselves as that with their run, which is after the Patriots run that we just saw Brady and Belichick and the evil empire go on. I thought we'd never see it again. I used to always tell you guys, say goodnight to the bad guys, because you will never see a bad guy quite like this again. Now, I don't consider the Chiefs bad guys, but as they continue to win, more and more people continue to start to hate them. We know excessive amounts of success breeds jealousy, envy, and hate. Hate. And 6 straight trips to the AFC Championship game, 5 of them at home. This will be the first on the road. 3 out of the last 5 Super Bowls they've been in, they can make it 4 out of 6 with another win here. Winning 2 out of those 3 Super Bowl appearances, people are getting sick and tired of being sick and tired of the Chiefs. That said, they don't care, and they continue to find ways to win. And this was probably one of their most impressive victories. That, and of course, the thriller back in 2019 or 2020, the overtime 2020. Was that 2020 or 2021? I lose track of these things. Whatever that thriller was, 40 to 36, I believe it was, in overtime. The 13-second game. That's what I'm talking about. This was the most impressive victory, though, because I'd left the Chiefs for dead. And I hadn't seen a complete team. I hadn't seen an offense that scared anyone. I didn't see Mahomes being confident in the guys he was throwing the football to. Travis Kelce looked like he was starting to slow down. He was dropping the football too. That shit is contagious, man. The dropsies are contagious. And even Kelce got bit by the dropsy bug. And I'm like, I don't see it. And then came the last two games. Even though they didn't score in the red zone, they were 2 of 6 against Miami. It still was a clinic. They were going up and down the field in frigid temperatures against the Miami Dolphins, and they made it look easy. They just couldn't finish the drives off. But they didn't need to. They knew the Dolphins weren't going to put up much resistance. However, the final score of this game was 27-24, if I didn't say it already. They're finding ways to win, and that's what the Patriots used to do. And the thing that is starting to strike me as very, very the thing that resembles the Patriots the most, I think, is the fact that every time we count the Chiefs out, we count Mahomes out, we count Andy Reid out, they win, and they find a way to get it done. They did it again, and they're going to be underdogs on Sunday. We'll see what happens again. I think everybody's rooting for the Ravens, but this Chiefs team doesn't give two shits, just like the Patriots never did. We'll see. As Boss likes to say, until somebody knocks Mahomes off the throne, give me the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. That's what we used to say about Brady. That fumble touchback rule, so many people, I didn't realize so many people hated this rule. I don't hate the rule. Don't fumble the ball by your own end zone. I don't hate the rule. You know what it is. And, you know, it sucks when you're stretching for the end zone and you get hit as you're stretching and the ball comes out and it goes out of bounds through the end zone and it's a touchback. That sucks. But be careful, right? Find a way to get it in the end zone without being reckless and losing the football, right? I have no issue, but I'm old man, get off my lawn. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I didn't want them to change the overtime rules. Now I don't have a problem with it. I didn't want them to change the extra point. Now I don't have a problem with it. And if they change this rule, I'm going to be like, no, you shouldn't do it. They're going to do it. And then once it's changed, I don't know what they're going to change it to. Are you going to just put the ball back at the spot of the fumble, which is trash? You're rewarding the fumbling team by giving them the ball back. I just don't think that if you force a fumble as a defense, whether it's intentional, it's accidental, whatever, if you force a fumble down by the end zone and it goes out of the end zone, you should be rewarded for that. You should be rewarded for that. So many people hate that rule. I don't know why, but anytime something happens in the playoffs, as we've seen in the NFL, more eyeballs means more outrage, means, oh my God, we got to do something. And I think this is the year that they finally do something. We've been hearing about them potentially changing this rule for years, but it's never come up in a game of this magnitude. Now that it has, I think we're going to see something done. Similar to the overtime rule. They have been thinking about changing the overtime rule. Then it happens in this same Chiefs-Bills game a few years ago, and all of a sudden, we got to change it, right? Here we go again. Finally, Chiefs saving their best for last on some Vanessa Williams shit. Saving their best for last. They seem very capable of repeating as Super Bowl champions now than ever before this season. I mean, the game against Buffalo that we just watched, was the most complete performance I've seen from Kansas City this season. Granted, their defense got gouged on the ground. which I did not anticipate. But true to form, they haven't surrendered a 300-yard passer all season. Josh Allen did not throw for 300 yards. Check. Hell, I don't even think Josh Allen threw for 200 yards. Whatever the case may be, check. They did not surrender 30 points. Haven't surrendered 30 or more points all season. Didn't in this game. Check. And when they needed a stop, as they've done all season long, they got the stop. Even though it was a missed field goal, still check. And hell, you could even argue before that, they got the stop that forced the Bills to feel desperate enough to go for a fake punt that they didn't get and put themselves in a position to ice the game if Mecole Hardman doesn't fumble. So that offensive performance, though, was the best to me by far, probably since an early week, like 5 or 6 drubbing of Chicago, like 45-10 at home. This was the most complete offensive performance we've seen from Kansas City in months, because Mahomes looked like Mahomes. He trusted his receivers. Valdez-Scantling, even though he caught one of them with his face mask, still caught it and then had another big catch down the field. So he was impactful, right? Travis Kelce was back, 2 touchdowns, a couple of big catches, over almost 100 yards receiving. He was back. Rashid Rice continues to be Rashid Rice, which is what we said he was going to have to be. He was good in this game as well. And so you got contributions from other guys. Everybody stepped up. We already know what Isaiah Pacheco is out of the backfield. How about Clyde Edwards-Helaire stepping in there and giving them quality touches? This was the most complete we've seen Kansas City look. That offense was moving the football. At one point, they seemed like they couldn't be stopped. It was the Kansas City Chiefs of old, it felt like. They've looked like that now for 2 weeks. Sans for not being able to score in the red zone against Miami. They cleaned that up against Kansas City, or excuse me, against Buffalo. So, I don't know, man. They look like they're poised to go into Baltimore and do some damage. That's going to be a hell of a football game. I know that. So that's what I got for you in terms of the divisional round and my biggest takeaways. If you think of something else that I may have left out, leave it down in the comment section. So we forge forward to social media maneuvers. I'm a midnight marauder. Y'all know how I do it, or rather, you know how we do it. So let's get to it. And how we do it here is very simple. If you have a comment that you want read on the air, use the hashtag LouieTLive to have your comment read. If time permits, we will get to it. Can't assure you that we'll get to your comment, but if you want to ensure that your comment is read, the super chat function is the way to go. So with that said, let's get to the comment section and we start the evening off. And I got some things that I want to talk about. We'll do that in garbage time. Let's get to the comment section. Antoine Hoskins, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Antoine writes, Lou, I'm heading to sleep. Stop by to show my support. I look forward to watching tomorrow. I appreciate you, Antoine. Appreciate you. And get some Z's for me too, man. I think I'm gonna hang it up after this is over with and try to get to the sack nice and early so I can get up and get my day started the right way tomorrow. So I ain't gonna be too far behind you, man. I'll tell you that right now. Try to get me some sleep. I'm gonna try to get on to a more regular sleeping pattern and stop acting like a damn owl, you know, up all night and trying to sleep during the day. I'm not a nocturnal creature, or at least I don't need to be. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, do you put Patrick top 5 all time right now? I think I've already done that in my mind. He's already got 2 Super Bowl rings. How many quarterbacks have that to their resume? I mean, not many have 2. There are many with, enough with 2, but he's better than those guys already, right? Like, obviously there's Brady, who has the most. Montana, I think, is second. If he's not second, he's tied with Aikman and Bradshaw and all of those guys. Bradshaw, I think, has 4. I think so. It would be Brady, then Bradshaw, I think. Then I think you get to like Montana, I think, has 3. I know Aikman has 3. And then you get into the slew of guys with 2. Both Manning brothers. Did Roethlisberger win 2? No, he won 1. He would have won a second had Rashad Mendenhall not fumbled. I think that's it. I mean, there's some other guys, some of the oldie but goodies from I think what was it? Ken Stabler might have 2 Super Bowls. Like there's some other guys that may have 2, but he's better than those dudes already, is what I'm saying. Like all the guys with 2 Super Bowl rings, other than Peyton Manning, I guess, is the one that he's not better than already with 2, but he's better than Eli already. He's better than Kenny Stabler and anybody else that might have 2 Super Bowl rings. He's probably already better than Troy Aikman, who has 3. Shit, he's better than Terry Bradshaw already, who has 4. I honestly believe, and Elway has 2. Elway has 2, and he's not better than Elway yet, right? But he's approaching that like very quickly. I mean, and look at what we're talking about. And this man, like a lot of people, it feels like Mahomes has been in the league for 12 years with all that he's accomplished already. The man has only been in the league for 6 years, right? Or excuse me, 7 years. He's been a starter for 6 of them. So in year 7 of his career, but year 6 as a starter, he's going to his 6th consecutive AFC Championship game. He's been to 3 Super Bowls. He's won 2 of them already. The man has already played in 16 playoff games already in 6 years. Let that sink in. 16 playoff. That's a career for most guys. If you're lucky, you could put 2 or 3 guys' careers together and you won't get 16 playoff games. He's got 16 going on his 17th in 6 years. So essentially, on average, he's playing 3 playoff games a year. That's where we're heading right now. That's insane. Anyway, the fact that we're having this conversation about his career and he's only in year 6 as a starter should tell you that he's already passed most of these guys already. I think he's already top 5, to be honest with you. He's something unlike we've ever seen before. So even without this Super Bowl, how many quarterbacks have gone to 6 straight AFC or NFC championship games? Only one guy can say he's been to more in a row, and that's Tom Brady. Nobody else can say that. Not in a row. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. He's gone to 6 consecutive. They hosted 5 of them. You can't make this stuff up. He wins this Super Bowl, and he's the greatest quarterback in NFL history, probably, is the conversation we're having. Obviously, Brady is who he's chasing. He's got 6, but even Brady, I don't think, saw this level of success. Brady won a lot quickly, right? 3 Super Bowls in his first 4 years as a starter. But we didn't look at Brady the way we look at Mahomes. Like, Mahomes has changed the game. We saw Brady for what he was, and he built up into the greatest of all time. Mahomes is already in that conversation right now. And even if he doesn't catch Brady in terms of Super Bowls, I still think there's an argument to be made that he's the greatest quarterback of all time. But there's a long way to go in his career. He wins a third Super Bowl. I think he's second behind Tom Brady. I'll just say that. He's second behind Brady. And I think it's Brady 1, Mahomes 2, and then I think there's a large gap between 2 and 3. And then you can start having discussions about whoever you want to put it, 3, 4, 5, et cetera, et cetera. Knock yourself out. In hindsight, okay, Kimura says Ben beat Seattle, yeah, when he was young, and then he had the Santonio Holmes play against the Cardinals. So yeah, he won 2 as well. Ben Roethlisberger won 2. That's right. You're right. King of the Bluegrass. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, in hindsight, would you have taken Trent McDuffie over Jahan from what you're saying with the play on the field and the potential future contributions? I loved Trent McDuffie in that draft. But you got to think about where we were at that time. We needed a receiver more than we needed a corner at that time. If you're thinking about where we were, we needed to pair Terry with somebody. He had nobody for the first 2 years of Rivera's tenure. He had nobody. We couldn't leave him out to dry again. So, we needed a receiver. I mean, now having, in hindsight, like you said, looking back, of course you'd take Trent McDuffie. One of the biggest needs we have defensively is nickel, is a slot corner. I've been crying for one for 3 years now. Bare minimum 3 years. Still haven't gotten a guy that can play the position with any consistency. We've had flashes. The last time we had consistent play in the slot was Kendall Fuller 1.0, the first time he was here. Ever since he got traded, we haven't had any success inside. Every now and again, Danny Johnson would play solid ball, but no, we've been pretty funky inside. So McDuffie can play everywhere. Inside, outside, doesn't matter. He's outstanding. Let's see. Let's get to the comment section. We'll knock out a few of these and get out of here. John Wynn, are we required to get another good player that can play for Seattle in this year's draft? For example, last year we picked up JSN and Devon Witherspoon on offense and defense. I mean, you would like to add those types of players every year if you can. Those are the kind of players you shoot for in the early rounds. You had 2 first-round picks. You hit on both of them, it looks like. And that's what you want to do with first-round picks in particular. You need to hit on first and second rounders, right? And when you don't, it hurts your franchise. It does. John Wynn says, LB needs to keep his voice down. It's like you guys keep picking on Ron Rivera. Like, what did Ron ever do to you guys in your guys' debate? Well, no, like we're both at fault there. When we're arguing like that, we're both in the wrong. Like one of us needs to talk and then the other one just needs to listen. And then when that person's done, the other can talk, right? It's easier said than done when you're in the moment, when you're in the heat of an argument, that the last thing you're thinking about is relenting and letting the other person speak. But I'm like I said, I'm growing in that capacity. I'll be better. I vow to be better. But Ron Rivera, to me, isn't a good defensive coach at all anymore. He's going to have to prove to me again that he can be a great defensive coordinator again. We're talking about over a decade. The NFL has changed drastically since the last time this man was an offensive coordinator. Are you kidding me? And I get it, being a head coach versus being a defensive coordinator where you just focus on the defense is totally different. And I'm fully aware, and we've seen a lot of these coaches go into the head coaching sphere, come out of it unsuccessful, go back to being a coordinator and dominate. Leslie Frazier is a prime example. We could talk about guys who have done it over and over again. Todd Bowles did it, right? Was a head coach of the Jets, failed, went back to being a DC, tore it up, et cetera, et cetera. But the difference is those guys weren't out of the game for a decade. They'd go coach for 3-4 years, be unsuccessful, come back to being a coordinator, and it's like they never lost touch with how the NFL is evolving. Ron Rivera hasn't been a defensive play caller in over a decade. I don't buy that he's just going to jump back into the saddle and act as if it's 2010 all over again. Sorry, not sorry. So, no, I don't believe that he's any good. But we'll see, right? If they hire him, it's not a guarantee that he gets that job. Niners fan. Right. The key to our defense, we have to get pressure on Goff because he always shrinks against us when he's uncomfortable. We have to blitz more, in my opinion. He's sucked over the years against you. That's part of the reason the Rams at one point hadn't beaten you in ages, right? You were had won 7 in a row or whatever the number was until they beat you in the NFC Championship game. And part of that was because Jared Goff was their quarterback and he just was awful against the 49ers. But different team, different Jared Goff, and different 49ers, different coordinator. And we'll see. It hasn't been pretty. I'll just tell you, you're going to have to be better. Just like I said about Detroit's defense. They're going to have to be better. 49ers defense, going to have to be better. That shit that they put forth on Sunday or Saturday night, that shit's not going to be good enough. You play like that against Detroit, including Brock Purdy, I guarantee you that game will not be there for you to steal at the end. You will lose that football game. So, going to have to be much better. And I agree with you. If you start the game out against the Lions, they had some injuries to their offensive line during the game. We'll see if Jonah Jackson can play. We'll see if Frank Ragnow, who finished the game, but we know adrenaline's a hell of a drug. We'll see if he's going to be good to go. I would assume so, but we'll see. So the interior of that line could be compromised. Maybe you can take advantage of it and you don't have to blitz. So you see that early on. If you figure out after the first or second possession of the game, hey, we're not getting the Goff, then that's when you're going to have to make the adjustment and you're going to have to turn the bitch up. That's how I would go about it. I wouldn't just come out of the gates aggressive, right? Lull him to sleep. Make him think, oh, they're not coming after me. And then come after his ass if you have to. Because you really don't want to. But if you have to, you got to do what you got to do. Bills fan 98. Right. Brandon Beane has to go. People keep blaming Josh, but our defense is allowed to make stops too. I couldn't find Ed Oliver all game, but in the biggest moment, Chris Jones made a play. And that's kind of what I've been saying about the Bills for years now, right? Going all the way back to 13 seconds. You've lacked a finisher, a closer, a guy that when the game is in the balance, you know is going to get to the quarterback or at least disrupt him and make a play. And that's why you went out and spent money on Von Miller. It was money wasted. You didn't know it at the time. He was coming off of a Super Bowl run where he was very impactful for the Rams. So you thought he could do the same for you. And clearly, as he continues to age, more injuries, he's been a shell of himself. Doesn't look like you're going to get any of the residuals that you're not going to get a return on investment. It doesn't seem like at this point. But at Oliver, you spent money on him. Again, non-existent in this game. You've spent draft capital on guys, AJ Epineza, as I mentioned, Boogie Basham. I don't even know if he's on your team anymore. Gregory Rousseau was a first-round pick. And, these guys are solid, but they're not game changers. And so you find yourself back in the same spot once again with no real difference maker in the front four. And that sucks. Because when you need us, and that's been one of my biggest criticisms. When you guys fired Ken Dorsey, my thing was, hey, look, I'm not telling you Ken Dorsey was doing a great job. And we saw the uptick in the offensive production when he was fired and Joe Brady took over. So obviously that was valid. But my biggest thing was he was being used as a scapegoat because at the end of these ball games, the defense wasn't getting stops. They were allowing teams to move the ball down the field, i.e. the Patriots game. Even the Bucks coming back and being within a Hail Mary of winning that game is crazy. The Giants literally were at the 1 yard line on 2 separate occasions and should have beaten you in that game. Your defense was allowing teams, the Broncos game, another example. Like, your defense let you down a lot this season. So I was disappointed in this particular game because had your defense rose to the occasion, you would have won the game. Think about how many times you went down the field and scored only to have Kansas City score right back on your defense. And me and Boss were talking about this. Kansas City was scoring in 5 or 6 or 7 plays. Like, their shit was bing, bang, boom. Mahomes had the big 40-yard run. Like, you took the lead. Like, you guys worked so hard. 13 plays, 83 yards, 7 minutes, right? You take a 24-20 lead and you're feeling good. Literally in 4 plays, they were right down there and they scored a touchdown. So while you're over here nickel and diamond and working hard and you can't make a mistake, you got to be perfect, these boys are over here just cruising down the field on your defense. How the hell does Travis Kelce get that wide open for a touchdown? This is the same team that went 2 of 6 in the red zone the week prior. Show some backbone and have some resistance and see if you can't keep them out of the end zone too. No, let's just blow coverage and allow Travis Kelce to catch the football and wilts into the end zone. I mean, the defense, like you said, needs to be held accountable. And if you want to blame Brandon Beane, go right ahead. I like Brandon Beane, but you can definitely criticize some of the moves that have been made, whether you're talking free agency or you're talking about the draft. It hasn't been great. You know, he's put together a good roster with a great quarterback that gives you a chance to win every year. But in order to put this team over the top, there are going to have to be some additions made with players that are going to be cheap labor. So I'm really talking about the draft here, that are going to have to come in and be impact players. He's going to have to kill it in the draft. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the Bluegrass writes, if McDonald shuts down the Chiefs, does that change your mind about him being the number 1 candidate if it was your choice? No. I told you I have a philosophical approach. I know what I want. I know how I want to execute it. And if I interview Ben Johnson and he wants the job and the energy is reciprocated and I feel like this is the right man for the job after talking to him, this will be Washington's 2nd interview with him. They've already completed a Zoom interview with him. When they finally sit down with him face to face and they get that vibe from him, like, yeah, this is the right guy, and he wants the job, I'd offer it to him. But should that fall through, should, he be after the money with the Panthers and David Tepper's wallet is just way too big and we can't compete, and he chases the dollars, I'd probably then really consider him or Bobby Slowick. Honestly, I think that would be the fallback plan. And at that point, I would be open to maybe elevating him over Bobby Slowick, just because you know how I am about do it again, right? Bobby Slowick did it once, and I'm pretty confident he's going to be able to do it again. But I need to see it, right, to be as confident as I am in Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick. Whereas with Mike McDonald, he's done it 2 years in a row in Baltimore. Now, last year wasn't as successful as this year, but once they got Roquan Smith last year at the trade deadline, it's been lights out. So I feel pretty confident about Mike McDonald's ability. Now, is he a leader of men? I don't know all of those things. Same thing could be said for Ben Johnson. I don't know that. That's why you would have to sit down, interview him, get a feel for him, and see how you feel. But no, it wouldn't change my mind. I want an offensive minded. I want an offensive coach if I'm going to draft a quarterback, which we all think is going to ultimately take place, I want to marry him with a young offensive mind if I can. If not, you know, if Ben Johnson, look, again, the goal and the key is to get the right man, not necessarily an offensive or defensive coach, but the right coach. We'll see. I'm not elevating him over Ben Johnson, though. All right. Let's see. Bills fan 98 writes, where was Rousseau? Also, so much for that AJ Epineza career year. He was invisible on Sunday. Yeah, he was killing it during the regular season. Didn't even know he played. That's unfortunate. Bean sunk all our money into aging pass rushers, and his first round picks have been bad. Yeah, and you know, some of these second rounders haven't hit. You know, Epineza was a second rounder. Boogie Basham was a second rounder. And they haven't, you know, I mean, Epineza, again, as you mentioned, career year, but when you needed him most, where was he? Still, yeah, I mean, it sucks when things don't pan out. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I can tell you this much. The seat just got hotter for Brandon Beane. Obviously, McDermott was on the hot seat had he not turned in the effort down the stretch that he did. I think both of them are going to be in warmer seats heading into next season. And if the results aren't what they need to be, there could be change coming. We'll see. Joe Rockhead, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, if Diggs wants out, you want him in Washington. Nah, I'm good. Again, he's got an enormous contract that I want no parts of. So, you know, trading for him, you'd have to give up draft capital, obviously, and then you'd have to eat the remainder of that contract, which is just massive. I'm not trying to do that. Again, there's always good young receivers that you can get for very cheap in the draft. That's what I'm into. That's what I'm into. We're not at a place. You add a Stephon Diggs if you think you're one or two players away from winning the Super Bowl. That's not what we are. So you don't go after a 30-year-old Stephon Diggs at this point of his career when you're trying to rebuild your organization. That's not where we are. So no, I wouldn't be interested at all. HTTR Carson writes, I'm shocked my Bucs already fired Adrian Griffin. I wasn't a Budenholzer fan, but maybe getting Dame would have solved the offensive woes in the playoffs. Giannis handpicked AG. I was shocked. I was definitely, I knew somebody was going to bring it up. I was definitely shocked when I saw that come across my Bleacher Report notification. I didn't see that coming. I had heard about some internal frustration. I remember the playoff, the in-season tournament when Bobby Portis kind of challenged them. I heard about that. Didn't really pay it that much attention. You know, tempers do flare from time to time, and these things happen, especially with a first-time NBA coach. We know the players really run these teams. When you have superstar players, they really have the final say so because you do everything in your power to please your star players. So, you know, coaches are, unless you're like some kind of legendary, they come dime a dozen, right? But I haven't really loved how the Bucs have moved with their coaching situation to begin with. I didn't think getting rid of Mike Budenholzer after his brother had just passed away, I didn't think that was how you do business. I didn't think that was the right thing to do. You know, that man won you an NBA championship, and that's how you do him. Like, I thought that was bullshit, to be honest with you. You may not be the biggest Bud fan, but that was trash, right? To me, at least. And then how they just did Adrian Griffin was crazy because, again, yeah, the defense sucked. What did you think was going to happen when you traded away not only one of the best defenders in the NBA, period, but probably the best perimeter defender in the NBA. What did you think was going to happen when you traded away Drew Holiday? Did you think your defense was going to get better after doing that? Like, where's the psychological sense in that? What did you think was going to happen? Now, I've heard that some of the adjustments defensively that he's made, he's so hell-bent on implementing his scheme that he's not adjusting to the skill set of the players that they do have, and hence they're one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA this year, right? That said, I still didn't think at 30-13 it was grounds for termination, but they had this shit in the works. The Bucs think that they're slick, but they hired Doc Rivers as like some sort of consultant to Adrian Griffin. They've been setting this shit up for months, because I think he's been on board now for 2 months with the Bucs. So they knew what they were doing when they did that shit. That was some low down, grimy ass shit. The Bucs organization, I'm telling you, man, it's some snakes in that front office. They've been up to no good. And boy, the gods don't like ugly. They can't. They're not winning another NBA championship anyway. They're not winning one anyway. But and I was actually rooting for them because they got Dame, and everybody wants to see Dame win something. But this ain't how you conduct business. Now they're going after Doc. Doc's going to be their next head coach. We'll see what happens, but I don't know, man. I don't like the way they conduct business in Milwaukee. Let's see. We'll take 1 or 2 more comments and then we'll get out of here. Niners fan. Went back and watched the end of the game, and Hargrave and Armstead actually had some big pressures to force the Love turnovers. It's more Chase Young being trash that's hurting us. Well, I saw interior pressure, but interior pressure don't mean a damn thing if you're not getting the exterior pressure, right? Because if you get interior pressure, which is usually the worst type for a quarterback, you can still escape out the back door, right? And out leverage the defensive end if there's no collapse around the edges. You got to close the quarterback off. It's supposed to be a group rush, right? Collapse the pocket inside. You run that arc, and now there's nowhere for you to escape. Just like if you run the arc and you turn the corner, but there's no interior pressure, I can just step up in the pocket. And now that guy that's coming around at 9 yards can't get to me because I stepped up in the pocket. I saw some interior pressure at points in the game, but like I said, there were more opportunities for Love to throw the football with a clean pocket than you would like to see. And that's been a consistent issue. Now, on that final pick, he got flushed out of the pocket. He made an ill-advised decision once he got outside. But guess what? He got flushed, but he got outside the pocket. He didn't have to do that. It's not like Nick Bosa or Chase Young was waiting on him after he flushed the pocket. He got outside. There was space and opportunity for him to run. If there was a defender that would have been, gaining on him rather quickly, and he didn't like it, he could have slid, or he could throw the football away. What was not on the menu was to go full Brett Favre on us. And literally, somebody played the side-by-side clip of the pick that Favre threw in Minnesota across his body against the Saints when they lost in the NFC Championship game. And it's literally the same play. Like, identical. It's crazy. John Wynn says, Drake May and Howe can work this out together and maybe take turns on who gets to start QB1 in Washington without making anything awkward. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Like, if they draft Drake May, he's the guy. Period. End of discussion. And you know what? I don't know if it would be awkward. I like to think that there would be a little awkwardness, but I think that they'd actually embrace it because they're friends. So I think they'd embrace being on the same team, trying to figure out. But it's still a competition because you want to play, right? You want to play. And I think where the awkwardness comes in is Sam Howell was always the teacher, so to speak. And Drake May was his understudy. And now the role could be reversed. And that's what could be awkward. Is now I got to sit behind the guy that had to sit behind me in college because I built the program back up and I gave him the keys. And now we get to the NFL and he's getting the keys and I'm just warming up the car for him. But when it's time to drive, I got to give him the keys and I got to get out of the seat. And that's not what I'm used to. So that's where I think it gets awkward. But we'll see. You know, a lot of time between now and then to see what happens. And he may not be the pick in Washington, right? We don't know. Sovereign Legacy. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Sovereign? Late to the party. I see the hat. Explain. Just chilling. Ain't nothing. Just chilling. Ain't nothing going on here, man. I felt like giving my head a rest by wearing a trucker hat. This was the only trucker hat that I had. It's very comfortable. I put it on. It's not much to it. You know, I still support Sam. I still think the guy's going to have a really good career in the NFL. I don't think just because it's over for him as a starter here now doesn't mean he won't get another opportunity elsewhere at some point. I still think there is a potential Drew Brees component to this man's career where his second act will be much greater than his first one. We'll see. I could be wrong, and he could just be a career backup the rest of his career. But I've seen guys with lesser talent get multiple opportunities to start in this league because there are just not enough good quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think he's one of the good ones. So he'll get another chance is how I see it. And whether that chance comes in Washington or not remains to be seen. But I still think he's got a chance to have a really good career. But that has nothing to do with why I'm wearing the hat. I'm just wearing the hat because it's comfortable. Period. Don't read too much into it. Anyway, I digress. All right, so we're going to now get to our final segment of the show and garbage time. So what I wanted to do is throw a couple of things out there from the coaching carousel, and really just from hires in general, front office, coaching, coordinator, all of that stuff. We're going to throw it all into one big pot and kind of discuss everything real quick because we're going to stay on top of this stuff, right? So we came into the week with how many openings? 6, right? I think we started with 8, and the Raiders and the Patriots both made hires already. So I think that left us with 6. Let's see. So Washington, Seattle, Tennessee, Atlanta, Chargers, and is that it? I think I have it in here. I don't even have to guess. I think I have it in my notebook. Yep, here it is. We had 8 openings. Patriots made a hire. Raiders made a hire. And the Panthers. That's who I left out. Chargers, Panthers, Falcons, Commanders, Seahawks, and Titans. All right. So we came into the week with 6 openings, and we came into the week with 1, 2, 3, think it was just 3 front office GM positions available. So 6 head coaching vacancies and 3 GM vacancies. So now you fast forward to Tuesday night. The Titans plan to hire former Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. Now, I've been seeing a lot of people clowning on the Titans because, one, they didn't try to trade Mike Vrabel. Because, and this was the excuse that was given, and I listened to Amy, forgot her name, something Strunk, I think her name is, in Tennessee, who's one of the owners. I think she's the majority owner. And she said that she didn't want to get in the back of the line. She didn't want to wait. She said coaches' contracts are different than that of players, and it would have bogged them down in the process of being able to interview coaches because they already would have had one. So in order to alleviate all of that, they just moved on from them and fired him. A lot of people was like, yo, you tripping. There's so many teams interested in Mike Vrabel. You probably could have traded him, similar to what everybody keeps saying about Mike Tomlin. Well, she wasn't interested in that. And then the other thing that people were laughing at them for is you did all of that, moved on from Mike Vrabel, who is a known winner, to go and get Brian Callahan from the Bengals, who wasn't even really truly the play caller because Zach Taylor was the real play caller there. That's the guy you're going to get? I mean, they needed an offensive guy. I told you guys that I didn't think that Titans job was all that attractive, right? So where did I have it ranked in terms of my jobs? I had that ranked as the 7th best job. It wasn't an ideal job. So that felt like the kind of hire that they were going to get. You know what I'm saying? I'm not shocked that that's what they settled in on. Nobody really wants that job. That, you know what that feels like? That felt like when Washington hired Jay Gruden from Cincinnati. Nobody really wanted the Washington job, and somebody's going to take it, right? Because if you don't think you're going to be able to get a job elsewhere, the first time you get offered a job, you're going to take it. Nobody was beating down Brian Callahan's door. He wasn't going to get a job from another team, I don't think. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but this guy wasn't going to get a job, I don't think. But the Titans don't really have a ton of options. They could want Bobby Slowick. Does Bobby Slowick want them? They could want Ben Johnson. Does Ben Johnson want them? They could want some of these other coaches. Do those coaches want them? And that's you never want to allow somebody to tell you no. You always want to feel like you are in a position to hire the guy that you want. It's very embarrassing when the game of musical chairs takes place and everybody gets a seat and you're still there standing up and all of the options have dried up and now you got to just hire somebody. You never want to feel like you're that organization. So you're instead of waiting, you are proactive and you go and get a guy so that you feel like, hey, this is the guy we wanted. Okay, fine. We'll see how it works out. I can tell you, it seems like there's a little bit of fishiness going on in Tennessee because the guy that was interviewing, he was firing fastballs at Amy. I mean, these were some 99-mile-an-hour heaters upstairs and inside, like heat check, chin check, back up off this plate, bruh, or sis. And he wasn't, I mean, clearly he was speaking for the people, okay? Because he was asking some real questions. And she didn't back down. I had respect for her. She didn't back down. Raiders to hire ex-Chargers GM Tom Telesco to the same position. After hiring Antonio Pierce, I thought they were just going to run it back. They had a brother running the front office as a GM. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what his credentials were. And again, what does a GM actually do during the season other than scour the other teams, the other teams around the league's practice squad and manage the waiver wire? Obviously injuries come up, and now you have to make some moves within your own roster and your own practice squad, but also there are other transactions happening around the NFL. You have to keep tabs on that. But other than that kind of stuff, like, what are you really doing? So I don't know if that guy that was the interim GM was really doing anything, is what I'm saying. But I digress. They hired Tom Telesco, who never really had a chance to be his own GM in LA with the Chargers, because the Spanos family, they're always breathing down your neck. Those are helicopter owners. So I wonder if the Raiders feel like the real Tom Telesco is fully capable of building a winner. Or maybe they just said, hey, we felt like the roster that he put together with his drafts were phenomenal, and we think he can duplicate that here. And again, nobody knows you better than a family member. So we'll see what Tom Telesco does. I didn't see him getting another GM job this quickly. I'm not going to lie. We'll see what that ultimately means for the Raiders. The Panthers to promote assistant GM Dan Morgan to their GM job. So they're removing the assistant title from his name and making him the new GM of their organization. Are you surprised? Are you surprised by this? Because I'm not. This felt really Washington Redskins-esque. This felt like, I'm going to fire my GM because we can do better. You go out here only to find out nobody wants your job. Nobody wants your job. Nobody wants to work for you. You're a toxic owner. I wonder, I struggle with this with people who don't have self-awareness. I struggle with that because I'm very self-aware. And I just think that's a trait that every human being should have. Because if you can't take a step back and look at yourself and the way you're doing things and be critical of yourself, then it's going to be hard for you to take criticism from others if you don't think you're doing anything wrong. And I wonder if he thinks he's done anything wrong yet. That's the problem with owners like David Tepper. He's, oh my God, he's resembling Daniel Snyder so badly right now. And everything that's happening feels like Daniel Snyder. And every answer to Daniel Snyder's problem, especially early on, was throw money at it. Throw money at it. They can't say no to money. We'll see if it works for him this time, but clearly these general managers, because this is what you got to understand. Coaches, they'll take your job because it's only 32 of them. And if I don't take this job, who's to say out? Like, if they offered that job to Eric Bieniemy, he'd take it clearly because he doesn't know if he'll ever get another opportunity, right? And that's how coaches are wired. Unless you're a hot commodity and you know, bro, I'm going to have another chance, don't take that job. I remember once upon a time, Sean Payton worked for Bill Parcells when he was with the Cowboys, and the Raiders job had come available, and Sean Payton wanted to take it, and Parcells said, don't take that job. You're young. You're a hot commodity. People want you. Don't take that job. Just wait. Another job will come available. He waited, and then the Saints job came open. He took it, and look what happened, right? When you have options, you don't have to jump at the first thing that comes your way. And so I think with coaches, you don't know if you're going to get another shot, so you got to take it. But the ones that have the good coordinators, the good coaches that have they're not going to Carolina. Same with GMs, they're more selective. Because if you already are an assistant GM, you're one step from being hired. And if you continue to do a good job, if you continue to be a part of an organization that's doing it the right way, teams will come calling. You'll have another opportunity. So if I'm Alec Hallaby or I'm Ian Cunningham, I don't have to take Carolina's job. I'll just stay in Chicago if I'm Ian Cunningham, or I'll just stay in Philadelphia if I'm Alec Hallaby. Somebody else will come calling next year. And hence, he had to promote from within to save himself from looking like nobody wanted my job. I'm just going to promote from within. Oh my God, I've seen this movie before. I truly hurt for Carolina Panthers fans. I really, truly do. Because we've seen this. If you're a Redskins fan, a Commanders fan, you've seen this movie all too often, and you know the signs, and it's nothing they can do about it. That sucks. Eagles fired both their offensive and defensive coordinators. This was to be expected. This all signs, even though it hasn't been reported that Nick Sirianni is going to be back, all signs point to Nick Sirianni being back in Philadelphia. And these are the moves that had to be made if he was going to be back. So defensive coordinator Sean Desai was fired. He was stripped of the play calling duties in like week 13, which was just crazy. I've never seen anything quite like this before. We've seen coordinators fired. We just talked about Joe Brady taking over for Ken Dorsey in Buffalo. But I don't know if I've ever seen a team at 10-3, I think it was, when he got his play calling duty stripped, but still remain on the team. And they have another guy that they bring in and he takes over play call. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. I remember Eric Washington struggling with play calling in Carolina after the last two coordinators got head coaching jobs, in Sean McDermott and Steve Wilkes, and then he gave it to Eric Washington. He struggled, and Ron, I think, had to take over. I think he took over, or somebody else took over the play calling. Ron was desperate at that point. But it's rare to see it stripped from a good team. Normally that happens when you're searching for answers and the season isn't going the way that you anticipated, and now you have to do something to try to save it. That was a weird situation, but he's fired. It's Sean Desai. And also offensive coordinator Brian Johnson, which was interesting because he actually had a head coaching interview. I was like, what? Head coaching interview for this guy? But he's been relieved of his duties in Philadelphia as well. So they'll be on the prowl for not only a new defensive coordinator, but also a new offensive one. Let's talk about the two biggest names out in the market as veteran head coaches. That's Bill Belichick and Jim Harbaugh. Let's start with Bill Belichick. So 3 days ago, over the weekend, you would have thought it's imminent. Something's going to get done. It's only a matter of time before Belichick to Atlanta is announced and they get the ball rolling in Atlanta. But then you wake up this morning, reports are that the Falcons have cooled on Bill Belichick and that they're not limiting themselves to Belichick. They're going to continue to move on with the process. They've interviewed like 80 dudes. 40 of them have been interviewed multiple times. So they're not effing around. The Falcons. They're trying to figure this thing out. Now, I still think Arthur Blank wants Bill Belichick to be his head coach. Here's the hang up. And this is what I warned everybody about with Bill Belichick. If you hire Bill Belichick, he's going to want some power. He's been at this too long. He's one of the GOATs of the game at the coaching position. He's not going, and he's been in power in a coach-centric model in New England for far too long for him to just leave and go to his next destination and be like, yeah, I'm going to just coach. He might have done that in New England had he stayed there. That might have been the compromise. But if I'm coming to your organization, oh, no, I need that power back, son. Let me get that. And so Arthur Blank is like, but we already got a GM here in Terry Fontenot. Like, we don't need you to do that. And Belichick's like, that's cool. I mean, we technically had a GM in New England. I just want to help. And they're like, yeah, but your help is more like you're telling them, you're not suggesting. And we really would like you to just coach the team. And he's like, let me think about that. And they're like, cool, don't think too long, though, because, like, we got to do something. And he's like, I'll get back to you. And they're like, all right, well, we'll do what we got to do in the meantime. You got our number. If you want the job, hit us up, and we'll figure something out. So that's kind of where they're at. And the Falcons are like, bro, if this is an issue, we can move on. I still think that's the guy that they want. They would also love Harbaugh, but I think Harbaugh to the Chargers is a done deal. I think they're working out the specifics. Harbaugh, there's a lot of demands that he's making that he wants. And if you want him bad enough, you're going to have to acquiesce. And I think the Chargers are trying to, figure everything out. Like I think Ed Dodds, the assistant GM in Indy, is a guy that Harbaugh is close with that he wants. So, like, they got to figure that out as GM. I think he wants a lot of his staff to come along with him. I think he wants, like, an analytics department, something that they don't have currently in LA, or at least not the group that he's comfortable working with. And so there's a lot of demands that he's making, and the Chargers have to figure out how they're going to meet all of these to get it done. So I think they're in the process of dotting I's, crossing T's, and if they can get everything squared away, I think he's the next head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. I think if he doesn't coach the Chargers, I don't think he's coaching in the NFL. He's going back to Michigan. That's what I feel like is going to happen. It's either Chargers or bust for Jim Harbaugh. I could be wrong about that, and he could be interested in one of these other gigs, but the one in LA with a quarterback already set up for them to win, all he has to do is come in there and give off his Harbaugh magic. I think that's what he wants. He doesn't want to go to Atlanta where they don't have a quarterback. That's not ideal for him. If I'm leaving Michigan, I need to leave to some guarantees. And the only team that you're leaving the Michigan Wolverines to get a guarantee with is the Chargers, because they already have an established top-tier NFL quarterback. The rest of these openings don't have that. So if you're Harbaugh, it's less of a risk to leave Michigan, this great job that you have, even though there's been a lot of turmoil and controversy and things going on. It's still a cake job, especially being that you've won a national championship, something that hadn't been done in almost 30 years, and you've been dominating Ohio State, something that none of the coaches prior to you could do, since like Bo Schembechler. I mean, who was the last coach to really beat Ohio State? What, Lloyd Carr, maybe? Like, what are we talking about? So, yeah, he could stay at Michigan. He could they would slide him a blank check. And the only thing that they would ask in that contract is you can't do this NFL shit with us every year. We're sick of this. You can't do this. We're going to give you the richest contract in college football history to be the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. But here's the catch. You can't interview for NFL jobs. You can't go anywhere. You're either with us or you're not. I think he wants to coach in the NFL. I think he's going to end up with the Chargers. So there's that. Anyway, a lot of these interviews are continuing to take place. We're going to see, I think, some more hires here shortly. I heard one rumor. I don't believe it. But I don't even know if he's even interviewed for their job. But I did see Dave Canales mentioned as a candidate that could potentially be the next hire in Carolina. That's interesting to me. That would fit a hire that you would make in Carolina because nobody wants your job. A guy like Dave Canales, who nobody had him on their head coaching radar, who had a really successful season, he would be a guy that would take an opportunity because he doesn't know if he'll get another one, right? Because you going back to Tampa and running it back with Baker, there are no guarantees. Baker Mayfield has never had 2 consecutive good seasons in his NFL career. There's no guarantee that you'll be thought of in the same light next year this time like you are right now. You may never be as hot as you are right now if you're Dave Canales. You might have to strike while the iron is hot. I don't know if there's any real legs to that story that I saw earlier, but something to keep an eye on. Something to keep an eye on. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the 391st installment of the Louie T Network podcast. Thank you guys for joining me. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys on Friday. That's when we'll be back on the Louie T Network podcast, and we will break down Championship Sunday, anything else that happens in the world of sports, anything else that happens in the NFL with the coaching carousel, with the front office moves, any hires. We'll cover all of those things and more on Friday. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys then. And until then, you guys take care. God bless and good night. LouieTeeNetwork.